Hello, my name is Tony Chan, reporting for TelecomTV. Today with me is Dan Pitt, who's the Executive Director of the Open Networking Foundation. Hi, Dan.
Hello,
Tony. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about SDN and the telco space. So what do you think telecoms providers what level are they at in terms of adoption of SDN?
So it's quite a broad spectrum of adoption, but mostly they're all in trials and trying to figure out where to apply it first. The technologies that underlie SDN apply in really every part of the telco operation, from long-distance transport to access to aggregation networks to their own data centers for both, and fixed and wireless operations both. So we are seeing some experimentation in data center applications, internal use and for new services, and we're seeing increased activity in using SDN technologies in the access networks and in the transport.
Okay. So the ONF obviously is one of the leading organizations in the promotion of SDNs. What is the ONF doing specifically for the telecom space?
So our job in ONF is the successful commercialization of SDN for the benefit of network operators. So we are championing all of SDN, the whole concept and the components thereof. And we speak hopefully to articulate the requirements and satisfy the requirements of the network operators of various types, whether it be enterprises, web-scale data center operators, cloud operators, or telecom service providers. So we have a lot of them as members. We have several of them on our board of directors. We have a powerful role for our board of directors. So we are trying to help the telecom operators modernize their networks and their processes to be more agile.
Okay. Obviously, when you're talking about networks, it's not going to be one network for everyone, right? So enterprises will have different requirements. Some of the big internet companies will have different requirements. And same with telcos, will have different requirements. Do you see the ONF kind of developing different streams of research or perhaps standardization towards these different networks?
Only to a limited extent. Most of what we do in technology development, either through standards or architectures or some open source code or interface definitions, is not particular to the type of application or to the type of network. It's to facilitate what we call an application-independent infrastructure whose behavior is governed solely by the operating software that runs remotely. We do, however, make sure that where we have the protocol between the control plane and the forwarding plane, and that's the OpenFlow protocol, it's the vendor-neutral solution, has the features it needs for particular telco use, such as in switching optical networks and wireless networks. Certainly we started out with a lot of application in data centers where it's just Ethernet switching and the transformation from north-south to east-west traffic flows. But that's a fairly generic solution that applies in the telco world as well. And it's only in a few specific instances where we have differences for these operators. Where there is a real importance for the telcos is in the control software and the interfaces to the applications, where they need to have information models across various kinds of northbound interfaces to get the network to do what their applications and their management systems needed to do.
Okay. One of the comments that I hear a lot from the industry is the fact that SDN, they say, is currently not carrier grade. This is some of the comments from carriers because they've always have this notion that carrier grade means something different from just standard hard networking equipment. How would you comment on that, the fact they have this perspective?
We actually have a working group on carrier grade SDN, but it's not the old approach of box by box carrier grade. More has to do with service by service carrier grade. What they really want to sell is quality of experience to their subscribers. And that's very much determined by the nature of the application the subscriber is buying, and that's software driven. So we want an infrastructure that's like the IT infrastructure that they're just getting into, where you expect individual components will fail, but you don't want the services running on them to fail. So we are striving to help them define robust services to take advantage of a flexible infrastructure.
So where do you think the SDN will go in the next couple of years? I mean, do you see rapid adoption from people like service providers, or do you see just slow ramping up of migration of data center infrastructure?
So I think we're going to see in the next 2 years a couple of very different components accelerating rapidly. One, down in the forwarding plane, we're going to see a lot more hardware and chip support for the OpenFlow protocol. And then they don't have to argue about the southbound interface anymore. The other is in the virtualization of network functions in the so-called NFV world, where they're learning how to put together these not only single functions, but collections of functions that can be chained together with the connectivity that SDN and OpenFlow can provide, so that they can reduce their cost and offer new services based on the virtualized network functions. I call it, NFV as a service.
Right. Those two acronyms tend to be brought up at the same sentence a lot. SDN and NFV. We know that the ONF is very involved in SDN in the OpenFlow initiative, but is it working also on the NFV part of the equation?
Yes, they are different, but they're not unrelated, and ONF has significant activities to support NFV. If you want to virtualize network functions that involve the forwarding plane, then you need some way to connect a software version of an appliance with the forwarding plane, because you want the software versions to run in the operations center, really, of the telco, the logically centralized control plane. You don't want thousands of appliances out in the network, which is the problem they have today. However, if these appliance functions need the cooperation of the forwarding plane, SDN provides that. So we're making sure we have the hooks in there, they know how to use it. We have an MOU with the SDNNFP industry specification group, and we're really devoted, in fact I'll talk about it later today, to the success of the SDNNFP effort.
Okay. And do you think that's becoming a reality in the next year or so?
I think it'll become reality, at least in terms of proofs of concept. SDNNFP has defined certain proofs of concept examples, and we are participating, and our members are participating in the development of some of those. We'll show a lot of these next fall at the SDN OpenFlow World Congress. And I think with the cooperation of vendors and operators alike to show real application use cases for NFV through working proofs of concept, it'll be a fairly short road to the commercial deployment of those.
Okay. Obviously, for NFV to work with SDN, I think the Northbound interface between the OpenFlow controller and the application layer has to come to some kind of standardization. And there's talk that this still needs to be worked out. This needs to be worked out.
Well, there is work going on. We have a working group on the Northbound interfaces. It's plural. Right. There won't be just one. We hope there'll be a relatively small number of popular ones. And what we've seen so far in our own work and the interaction we have with the SDNNFP, with the UCI Forum and other bodies, is that we're defining some information models, and they're very use case specific, which means if you want to do some kind of a firewall or a load balancer, there's an interface that defines really for the application the abstract capabilities of the network, and in the reverse direction, the abstract requirements of the application to the network. So I think you'll see collections of information models for particular use cases, and you can then build a collection of these to have a certain commercial or deployed northbound interface that meets specifically the needs of the use cases that are anticipated.
Okay. The last question I would ask is for people looking at the SDN market. It's becoming quite a crowded space now. There's a lot of different organizations proposing, all claiming to be SDN based. People like Open Daylight, for example, OpenStack. The MEF, I think, has their own proposal for software-defined networking. A lot of the vendors have their own kind of brands for software-defined networking. How do you see this evolving, and what's your recommendation to service providers when they're actually looking at some of these solutions?
So clearly a lot of organizations are interested in it because it brings benefit in a lot of contexts. We run a very large liaison program in ONF because we want to make sure that they have full advantage in these other spheres of the benefits of SDN. So we do SDN all the time. That's all we do. But we interface with them to provide them with solutions, interfaces, and ways they can leverage this SDN infrastructure and concept and architecture that we have developed. So that's why we work closely with these. Open Daylight's a little different. They're doing an open source implementation of an SDN controller. And so we work very closely with them, especially on the interfaces. We'll provide code where it might help. And our members are very active in both organizations. We want to avoid duplication of effort. And we have people speaking this week at the TM Forum meeting going on in Nice. I'll be at the telecom management, total telecom management conference in London next month, talking with them. So we want there to be one good story they can all rely on, and the solutions that we advocate are widely applicable and vendor neutral. And we think in that manner they're very attractive to network operators.
Thank you very much, Dan, for your time.
It's my pleasure, Tony.
This is Tony Chan signing off for TelecomTV.